Welcome back, everybody, to Air Crash Deep Dive.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at a really interesting one today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This is Air Canada Flight 624.
Oh.
This was an Airbus A320
Okay.
that landed short of the runway in Halifax
Okay.
back in March of 2015.
Right.
Now we've got, we always like to have the official accident reports.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we're working with the Transportation Safety Board of Canada report here.
Excellent.
And, this one's got a lot of layers.
It does.
So let's set the scene a little bit.
Okay.
So we're going to fly from Toronto to Halifax.
Right.
And it's late at night.
Okay.
Outside.
Yeah.
Blizzard.
Oh, my gosh.
So you can imagine the crew is probably feeling a little bit of pressure.
I would imagine so, yeah.
Especially considering night. Yeah. And they even knew that another flight had just missed the approach.
Oh, wow.
Just minutes earlier.
Oh, that's not good.
Because of the snow.
Yeah. I can see how that would make you feel a little bit uneasy.
So the reported visibility was half a mile.
That's not very much.
Which was right at Air Canada's minimum allowed at the time.
Right.
And that differs from other countries.
It does, yeah. In many other countries, that would have been what they call an approach ban.
Right.
They wouldn't have been able to even try to land.
Wow.
So just that in itself is kind of interesting.
Yeah. So they're coming in to land, and they decide to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And they use what's called a stabilized constant descent angle approach,
Okay.
which heavily involves the autopilot.
Okay.
Now, this is where things get kind of interesting.
Right.
The report found that Air Canada's standard operating procedures, or SOPs, did not require the crew to continuously monitor their altitude after a certain point.
Okay.
And this is directly contradictory to the guidelines that came from Airbus.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What did Airbus say?
Which emphasizes constant monitoring.
Right. So they were basically saying, okay, well, we've got the autopilot on. We're coming in. We're in this constant descent. We're good to go.
Right.
Whereas Airbus is like, no, you always need to be monitoring that. You always need to know what that altitude is.
Exactly.
So that's a pretty big discrepancy.
Yeah. So the TSB report points to this as a major contributing factor.
Wow. Okay. So we've got bad weather. We've got a decision to land despite the low visibility. We've got reliance on autopilot without continuous monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
It's already shaping up to be a bit of a recipe for something to happen.
Right. And now let's add in visual illusions.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So the runway lighting in Halifax was dimmer than what the crew requested.
Okay.
And when you combine that with the snow, it can make the runway appear further away than it actually was.
Yeah, it's almost like driving in fog. You know, you think something's much further away than it is, and you get up to it, and you're like, oh, wow, that was a lot closer than I thought it was.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, there wasn't a lot of what's called cultural lighting around Halifax.
What's cultural lighting?
That would be like the city lights and buildings.
Right. Okay, so there wasn't as much kind of visual reference.
Exactly. So it was hard for the pilots to judge their distance and altitude.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then on top of that, the runway itself slopes uphill.
Okay. So that would also throw off your perception a little bit.
Yeah, so if you're coming in for a landing and you're looking at the runway, that uphill slope can make you think you're higher than you actually are.
Oh, interesting.
So we're talking about multiple factors that are kind of working against the crew here.
Yes. Absolutely. We've got low visibility, we've got the dim lighting, we've got that lack of visual references, and we've even got the runway itself kind of playing tricks on their perception.
Yeah, and it's in these kinds of situations where things aren't quite going as planned that what's called plan continuation bias can kick in.
Oh, I've heard of this. Yeah. Tell me more about it.
So plan continuation bias is that tendency to cling to your initial plan even when you're seeing signs that things aren't right.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Right. It's like, you're driving to a restaurant.
Yeah.
And your GPS is telling you to go a certain way, but you're seeing signs that maybe you shouldn't be going that way.
Oh, I've been there.
But you just keep going because you think, oh, the GPS knows what it's doing.
It'll sort itself out. Yeah, I've totally been there.
But deep down, you know you're probably lost.
Right.
And the TSB report suggests that this kind of thinking might have been going on with the crew.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even though they had all these challenges, they were so focused on sticking to that original plan that they might have been hesitant to abort the landing.
Exactly.
Wow. And that hesitation, even just for a split second, can make a huge difference in aviation.
Absolutely.
So far, we've got this whole buildup of factors.
Okay.
Challenging weather, the reliance on the autopilot, the tricky visual conditions, and now this plan continuation bias,
Right.
all potentially playing a role in what happens next, which is...
Yeah, the plane ends up landing short of the runway.
Yeah, and not just like a little bump. I mean, we're talking multiple impacts here.
Yeah, we're talking engines detaching, the plane sliding along the ground.
Oh my God.
It must have been terrifying for the people on board.
Oh, absolutely. So what happens next? We got to find out what happens to those people.
We'll talk about that in just a minute.
So now you're on this flight. You've just had this incredibly rough landing.
Right.
And now you've got to evacuate.
Yeah.
It's dark,
Mm-hmm.
cold snow blowing around.
Right.
You're probably in shock at this point.
I can't even imagine the report talks about people opening the overwing exits before they were told to.
Oh, wow.
Some grabbing their carry-on bags, even though they were told not to.
Oh, no.
Nobody was in the brace position.
Oh, geez. It's like all that stuff you learn in the pre-flight safety briefing goes right out the window.
It's almost like they're not even there for a reason.
They're there for a reason. It's just...
Yeah.
Right?
You know when your brain's flooded with adrenaline and fear?
Yeah.
Rational thought kind of goes out the window.
It's instinct.
It is, yeah.
Like we were talking about before, those small things coming loose in the cabin.
Right.
You know, one of the flight attendants was actually injured by the coffee maker.
Wait, the coffee maker?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, the report found that it wasn't secured properly,
Okay.
and it came loose during the landing.
Oh, wow.
Hit the flight attendant.
Oh, no.
And you know what's even crazier?
What's that?
The locking mechanism on it was probably already damaged
Oh, really?
from previous landings, you know?
Just the constant jolts?
Yeah, so it's like how many other little things
Yeah, what else is in there?
in that cabin could become a hazard.
Right, exactly. I never would have thought of a coffee maker
Right.
as being a hazard in a plane crash.
Yeah, and this is why you're told to stow those loose items.
Makes you wonder.
Right.
If I'm ever at a crash, I'm going to be looking around like, what's going to hit me? Right. And then, you know what else is really interesting is the first officer's seatbelt.
Right, what about it?
It was damaged.
Oh, really?
So it wouldn't have locked properly
Oh, wow.
during the impact.
And so that's the shoulder harness.
Yeah, so there's this inertia reel
Right,
that's supposed to lock the belt during sudden acceleration like a crash,
right.
and they think the damage happened because of improper testing.
Oh, so someone messed up.
Yeah, there's a specific procedure you have to follow when you're testing those harnesses,
Right.
and it seems like someone just didn't do it right.
Wow. So a simple mistake during routine maintenance
Right.
could have had serious consequences?
And it did the report links that faulty seatbelt to how severe his injuries were.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, he suffered a serious eye injury,
Oh, wow.
likely because the harness just didn't restrain him properly.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it makes you think about all these things that we don't even think about.
Yeah, things that could go wrong.
Right. And, you know, the report also brings up this issue of the captain's sleep apnea.
Sleep apnea.
Okay, it's a condition that causes pauses in breathing
Right.
while you're sleeping,
Mm.
and it can lead to daytime fatigue.
Right.
And the captain had been diagnosed with this, but he wasn't consistently using his CPAP machine.
Right. That helps regulate breathing while you're sleeping.
Exactly. And now the report does say that they didn't find any evidence that fatigue was a factor in this particular crash.
Okay.
But they do emphasize that it's a broader risk.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, and they point out that some countries like the U.S. have much stricter protocols for this sort of thing.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, pilots there have to submit data
Oh, wow.
from their CPAP machines
Okay.
to prove that they're using them.
So they're actually being monitored.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's like, are we going to see some changes now?
Yeah. Is this going to be a catalyst for change?
Not just in Canada, but, you know, globally.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked about what happened inside the plane,
Mm-hmm.
but what about outside?
Right. What about the airport's response?
It wasn't exactly a shining example of emergency preparedness.
Oh, no. What happened?
For starters, there was a power failure.
A power failure at the airport?
And you'd think they'd have backup systems in place.
Yeah, you would think.
Well, the backup generators did kick in,
Okay.
but one of them quickly failed
Oh, no.
because of a fault,
Okay.
and the other one overloaded
Oh, God.
and shut down.
So no lights, no power.
No lights, no power, and that knocked out their radio repeaters.
Oh, the radio repeaters, those are important for communication.
Yeah, and you know what's even worse?
What?
The repeaters themselves had backup power,
Okay.
but the network switch that connected them did not.
Oh, my God. So it's like this one little thing
One single point of failure
brings the whole system down.
brings the whole system down.
Yeah.
So now we've got confused passengers, injured crew, No power-limited communication.
Everyone's stuck out in a blizzard. This is like a disaster movie.
It is what happened next.
I don't know, but it can't be good. It took them almost an hour to get power back to the terminal. Wow.
And of course, emergency responders are trying to do their thing, but they've got limited radio range.
Right.
And the report actually criticizes how the airport handled getting the passengers to shelter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they didn't really have a clear plan.
For what to do after an accident?
Yeah, like for transportation.
Oh, wow.
And the International Civil Aviation Organization actually has guidelines
I bet they do.
that airports should have transportation resources as part of their plan.
Yeah, especially in Halifax.
Exactly right. You're going to be stuck out in a blizzard.
You need to get people inside.
Absolutely.
So what went wrong? Did they just not have enough buses?
Well, it sounds like they had a plan on paper,
Okay.
but they hadn't really thought it through,
Oh,
like the logistics of it.
okay.
Like their plans didn't actually say which vehicles
Or how to request them.
or how to request them
That
exactly.
was a communication breakdown.
Yeah, a real breakdown in procedure.
Which is why those emergency drills are so important. Absolutely, because you don't just need the plan, you need to know that it works
Right.
when you need it.
And it seems like they didn't.
Right. So I think it's important to also think about what this all means for us as passengers.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
We always want to improve safety.
Exactly, and we talk about all these things so that we can all learn from them.
So what can we take away besides packing a winter coat, even if we're going somewhere warm?
Well, the report had some interesting things to say about those visual illusions.
Oh, right.
During landings, remember how we were talking about the dim lights, the snow, the lack of city lights in Halifax?
Right.
That could really mess with a pilot's perception.
But what can we do about that as passengers?
Well, we can be more aware of it.
Okay.
So, like, instead of just focusing on a single point of light,
Mm-hmm.
try to scan the environment. Look for multiple cues
Okay.
to help you judge the distance and the altitude.
So be more observant.
Exactly. Don't just assume everything's fine.
Pay attention.
And of course, we also talked about those passengers grabbing their bags.
Oh, yeah.
That's just a classic example of how stress
Takes over.
just hijacks your thinking.
And it makes that laptop seem really important,
Right. Suddenly it seems like the most important thing in the world.
even though it's not.
Not at all. You're going to slow everybody down.
Get out of there.
Exactly.
So the report also stresses, dressing appropriately.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Some people were in shorts and sandals.
Oh, my gosh. In that weather,
I know.
not a good idea.
So yeah, sturdy shoes,
Mhm.
weather-appropriate clothing.
You never know what you're going to encounter.
So those are some practical tips.
Right.
But what about the bigger picture?
Well, I think this could really be a catalyst for change,
Okay.
especially with those systemic issues that we talked about.
Like the sleep apnea management.
Right. And those pilot training issues.
Right. And the oversight of airline procedures
This accident really exposed some gaps.
that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. It's about learning from these mistakes.
Mhm. And making sure it doesn't happen again.
Right. And the good news is that change is already happening.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, the report mentions that Air Canada has revised their manuals,
Okay.
and the airport has made infrastructure improvements,
Okay.
and pilot training has been updated.
Well, that's great.
So it's reassuring.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's really a testament to these investigations.
Yeah.
Because it's not about blaming anyone.
It's about finding those problems and fixing them.
Right. Making things safer for everyone.
Exactly. And I think that's a really crucial takeaway here.
Yeah.
These accidents, as tragic as they are,
Mm-hmm.
they remind us that safety is an ongoing process.
Yeah.
We always have to be vigilant.
It's a team effort, right?
Absolutely. Everyone has to work together.
From the pilots and the airlines to the regulators and even us,
The passengers.
the passengers, exactly.
And I think the best way to honor the people who were affected by this crash
Yeah.
is to keep asking those tough questions, push for improvements, and never become complacent about safety.
Well said. Well, that's our deep dive into Air Canada Flight 624.
A lot to think about there.
It is a chilling reminder of how many factors can affect flight safety and how important it is to keep learning and keep improving.
Absolutely.
Until next time,